1958 Longines Mystery Dial, the official watch of functional alcoholism and a mid-century suspicion of confirmed bachelors. A lot has been said and written about the Cold War. We all know how it was a time of fear of nuclear annihilation and being able to house and feed a family of four on a steelworker's salary. Khrushchev is heading up the Soviet Union, Ike is sitting in the White House, as he damn well should, and Bobby Darin is splishing, or splashing. Much like the consequences of the Arab Spring, it's still not entirely clear. What permeates all of this, though, is, in North America at least, a sense of innocent optimism. America's in the moral right. Finns make cars go faster. And all Germans were Nazis. Well, except the boffins that build rockets. They're all right. Although moral rectitude is the outward persona of Western society, cracks in the facade of this societal pretense are already beginning to show in ways that even those wishing to maintain the order of things don't quite understand. It was at once a time, as Adam Curtis points out, of instituting conformity to match consumerism to the capacity of manufacturing, but also of looking to the future in a big way. Before the war, many Americans were focused on the front of the soup line, more so than the decades ahead. Newfound prosperity, though, thanks in large part to the war, meant that there was a seemingly endless expanse of possibility, and it was the kind of freedom that birthed this watch. Right, so let's imagine that you were alive in the late 50s. You live with Ma and Pa and Sis and Fido in a neighborhood which would eventually be taken over by meth labs and flop houses, but at least for now is a well-manicured model community. On Sundays, cool bachelor Uncle Tom comes over. He drives a DeSoto convertible. He wears seersucker suits and wayfarers. Nobody knows what Tom does, but he works for the government somehow. He listens to what your parents refer to as Negro music. He reads both Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir because he can go either way. A man like this has carefully considered tastes. He likes new things that put him at what he considers to be the forefront of modernity. Substance can catch up to form later. So what kind of watch does Uncle Tom buy? A Longines Mystery Dial, of course. The Mystery Dial appeared in the mid-1950s as the brand's signature upmarket dress watch. In a variety of cases, dials, markers, and bands meant that there was no shortage of individualism that could be imprinted on this watch. This particular example is housed in a gold-filled case, bears a textured dial, subdued star-shaped hour marker, and original champion mesh gold-filled bracelet. The watch is light and well-proportioned. At only 32-33 millimeters across without the lugs, this watch doesn't depend on size to make its presence known. The movement, not that it really matters, is a typical, albeit well-finished, mid-50s Longines 17 Jewel Cal 19A automatic, which is keeping plus or minus 8 minutes over 2 weeks of daily use. To refocus, though, it's really the overall aesthetic of this piece which is as interesting as when Uncle Tom fled his Chinatown-adjacent apartment and your parents were alerted to his disappearance by the owner of an opium den who he stiffed for $15. Now, we have to clear something up. No matter how much you try, there's really no getting around the fact that there's no real mystery to how the Mystery Dial works. The hour marker sits lower than the minute indicator, and so Longines just strapped a disc to where the hour hand should be and make the hole for the minute. And yes, this will ruin the watch for those who live relentlessly in reality. But for the rest of us, this gimmick is still refreshing, like rewatching Friends and still being able to chuckle at the jokes. Much like Friends, this watch also has a legacy which changed Longines forever. It has become an icon of the period, much like Uncle Tom when it surfaced that he was living in Moscow and had been feeding secrets to the Ruskies for years. So, what's it like to own? Well, owning one of these watches is like owning an old car. It takes a certain amount of dedication. You have to service it regularly, and you can't make it a daily wearer. Although many parts are shared with other Longineses of the era, many others are unique to the Mystery Dial, especially the trim or visible pieces. To make matters worse, it's really easy to screw up these exclusive components during routine maintenance, so knowing a good watchmaker is a plus. Also seemingly inherited from vintage American cars of the period is that the build quality on these things was variable. Some of the components fit together worse than a mid-70s GM product. But if you're willing to put up with all of this, all of this, much like owning an old car, owning and wearing this watch can be very rewarding. It gets looks, smiles, and compliments when you wear it. It appeals to a really wide demographic. I mean, wider than any other vintage timepiece that I've worn. It might be the usual sort of like attraction to a gimmick that is the missing hour hand, but maybe, just maybe, it's because this watch was birthed from a confident, optimistic vision of the future that we all yearn to recapture. Original case paraphernalia.